For centuries, the Zorvath Dominion had shaped the stars in their image, bending civilizations beneath their will. They did not conquer with chaos. They conquered with absolute control. Earth was just another entry on a list of soon-to-be assimilated worlds. Deploy atmospheric suppression. Their sky belongs to us now. Grand Marshal Vorthek Chiron stood at the central command dais of the Doomspire, his four-clawed grip tightening around the tactical control rail as he watched Earth's cloud-veiled surface on the laser plasma display. The planet loomed beneath them, a blue and green anomaly among the Dominion's previous conquests. Chiron's second-in-command, Admiral Varric Toval, tapped in a sequence on his control panel. A moment later, the Zorvath suppression fleet broke formation and began their descent. From the ground, it was a sight no human had ever witnessed. 49 monolithic warships, each the size of a city district, piercing through the stratosphere. Their exteriors, forged from compressed void steel, reflected the glare of the midday sun, turning the sky into a shimmering lattice of distorted light. Cities fell silent. The streets of New York, Beijing, Moscow, and Berlin became graveyards of movement. People tilted their heads upward, shielding their eyes as the alien vessels slowly eclipsed the sun, casting shadows that stretched across entire districts. On board the Doomspire, Chiron exhaled slowly through his secondary mandibles, his gaze locked onto the descending ships. Humanity, he muttered to himself, a species on the brink of unity, yet forever divided by their own wars. Their weaknesses are countless. He turned to his bridge officers. Let them tremble, then they will kneel. Aboard Earth Defense Command, Commander Ren Margrave watched the invasion unfold through his heads-up display, the air around him thick with the heat of tension. The war room's lighting flickered between the cold glare of alert panels and the fiery warnings flashing across the laser plasma interface. A voice cut through the static of the war room. Doomspire's fleet has entered lower atmosphere. They're deploying atmospheric suppression. Margrave didn't blink. He leaned in, his fingers pressing against the display console, eyes reflecting the descending behemoths. His expression didn't waver. They think we're watching the end. His voice was calm, almost too calm. They don't realize they're watching the beginning. The ground trembled as Zorvath suppression emitters powered up, their gravitic field projectors, designed to crush planetary resistance before engagement, sent deep vibrations through the Earth's crust. Streetlights flickered, vehicles stalled mid-motion, electromagnetic pulses disabled communication networks. For the invaders, it was routine. For Earth it was anticipated. Initiate signal collapse. The order rippled through Earth's underground defense grid. In an instant, what had looked like a planet in panic became a battlefield of anticipation. The Zorvath's first shock troop deployments barely had time to land before their data feeds scrambled, their command lines flickered into static, and their fleet-wide targeting systems jammed in real time. We've lost direct uplink with our forward battalions, one of Toval's officers barked from the Doomspire's command pit. What? Chiron turned, his throat clicking in irritation. That's impossible. A deep tremor shuddered through the warships still descending, but this was no turbulence from the atmosphere. Something was firing back. It began subtly, a flicker of motion between high-rise structures, a ripple of shadow across the dense cityscape. Then came the retaliation. From what had seemed like mundane office buildings, derelict structures, and defunct military bases, missiles surged toward the sky in a synchronized eruption. Not crude explosives. Hypersonic kinetics launched by deep-embedded rail batteries, accelerating at speeds no Dominion ship could counter in such close range. One of the first Zorvath warships to take the hit was Vorthal's Grasp, a frontline siege carrier descending over Berlin. A tungsten carbide payload, the size of a commuter train, tore through its underside hull plating, igniting a secondary explosion within the ship's internal energy conduits. From the streets, it was a sight straight out of an apocalypse, a warship of immeasurable power, faltering, twisting, plummeting. It spiraled uncontrollably, its impact sending a shockwave that shattered glass across the city. The entire invasion fleet was compromised in an instant. The bridge of the Doomspire was no longer a bastion of confidence. Alarms screamed. Officers scrambled to re-establish control. Chiron's voice cut through the noise, sharp as a blade. I want a full systems report now. Admiral Toval's eyes darted over the fluctuating tactical display. Ground-based countermeasures, they've been hiding their weapons. We never detected these rail systems. It's not just one city, it's planetary-wide resistance. Chiron stepped forward, his movements slow, controlled. He inhaled deeply, the scent of burnt atmosphere filling his secondary lungs. "This isn't random," he said. His voice, though barely above a whisper, was the cold edge of realization. "They planned for us." The heads-up display flickered as a new alert came through. Lunar emissions detected, orbital countermeasures. Online. Margrave stood in the Earth Defense Command war room, arms folded, his expression unreadable. "They're running their usual conquest cycle," he muttered. "They expected submission. They prepared for resistance. They never imagined we'd go hunting." On the moon's southern pole, beneath layers of dust and deception, the doors of subterranean defense station Theta 9 groaned open for the first time in history. What emerged wasn't just planetary defense. What emerged was the end of Zorvath's certainty. Chiron's secondary hearts pounded in disbelief as the Doomspire's orbital scanners picked up new contacts. "Explain those readings." An officer's mandibles trembled as he read the report. "Sir, they have spaceborne assets." Chiron's pupils contracted sharply. "What?" Lunar rail platforms, online orbital strike systems engaged. A cold, sharp weight pressed into Chiron's chest, a feeling he had not known in centuries. Dread. His mandibles twitched as he processed the implications. This was no panicked world defending itself with whatever primitive weapons it had. This was something else. This was an ambush. From the lunar horizon, Earth's hidden relativistic kinetic platforms aimed skyward, each one a silent executioner, unseen until it was far too late, and now it was too late. From the command deck of the Doomspire, Chiron stared at the battlefield below. Earth was never a target. It was a trap. "We are not the ones who should be afraid." Ruthen Margrave's voice was steady, his words deliberate. The Earth Defense Command war room was awash in data projections, the laser plasma displays flickering with incoming combat feeds. Around him, operators worked with a practiced intensity, moving between terminals with the precision of a symphony's final crescendo. Zorvath's invasion was crumbling before it even began. On the Doomspire, Grand Marshal Vorthok Chiron's mandibles twitched, his secondary hearts thudding in sync with the cascading alarms that now flooded the bridge. The heads-up display before him stuttered with disruption markers, each one a Zorvath warship succumbing to an unseen force. This planet was supposed to be fractured, he growled, his voice taut with disbelief. Their technology inferior. He turned to Admiral Varric Toval, his movements measured but seething with unspoken fury. "Explain." Toval didn't answer immediately, his attention locked on the chaos unfolding in real time. Their warships, descending in unwavering formation, had been reduced to prey beneath a storm of coordinated fire. What had looked like ordinary infrastructure, only minutes ago had transformed into a calculated death trap. From the streets of New York, high rises shifted, panels retracting in seamless mechanical precision, to reveal railgun arrays buried in their architecture. The moment the suppressor ships hovered into range, coils charged and fired. A projectile the size of a small car, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through the hull of a Zorvath siege ship, tearing through decks like paper before exiting the other side. The craft lurched, its internal structure caving in as it spiraled downward, smoke trailing in thick tendrils. Across Beijing, highways that had once seemed routine suddenly fractured at their seams. Roadways split apart, revealing missile platforms that had lain dormant beneath the asphalt for decades. From these hidden silos, hypersonic payloads surged upward, their trajectories locked onto descending warships. One Zorvath carrier, caught mid-course correction, attempted to maneuver out of the blast zone. It never had a chance. The moment the missile detonated, the air itself seemed to rupture, sending a concussive force through the vessel. Fire consumed its underbelly, spreading through its compartments before it began its uncontrolled plummet into the Pacific. Chiron's talons scraped against the console as he processed the reports. His fleet, designed for swift planetary dominance, was being dissected like a body left to scavengers. "They're not reacting like prey," Toval murmured. His voice had lost its edge of confidence. Chiron's stare was cold. "Then we stop underestimating them." His next command came without hesitation: "Deploy ground forces." In seconds, Zorvath dropships disengaged from their crippled warships, plummeting toward the surface like obsidian daggers. Their hulls reflected the dying light of their own fleet as they descended into the shadows of Earth's cities. And yet, there was no panic. No screaming masses flooding the streets, no helpless resistance waiting to be trampled, only silence. The first deployment hit the ruins of Berlin, their drop pods smashing through concrete, kicking up debris. Zorvath soldiers, each one clad in reinforced war armor, weapons primed for extermination, advanced through the dust. Their targeting systems struggled to locate hostiles through the interference. Then the shadows moved. The first scout unit barely had time to register the shift before the attack came. From the skeletal remains of the city's infrastructure, autonomous combat units emerged, quadrupedal drones, their frames sleek, silent, engineered for urban warfare. Their targeting systems had already mapped out the weak points of Zorvath armor before the first shot was fired. The lead Zorvath soldier jerked backward, a thin red beam cutting through his helmet's neural interface, severing his brainstem before he could even react. The others opened fire, but the drones didn't move like infantry. They didn't take cover. They didn't hesitate. They calculated. One drone pivoted mid-stride, its motion a seamless blur as it fired into the second rank of soldiers, striking the exposed joint plating of their armor. Another used its limbs to vault off a fallen bridge section, landing in the center of the formation, its integrated energy blades igniting as it cut through the staggered invaders. Zorvath battle formations collapsed instantly. It was the same across every other landing zone. In Moscow, the Zorvath stormed through what they thought was an abandoned city district, until the rooftops erupted with coil gun fire, raining down accelerated slugs that punched through their reinforcements. In Tokyo, they encountered what looked like civilians, until the bodies shimmered and distorted, revealing hard-light decoy projections, designed to draw them into a choke point. By the time they realized the trap, half of their battalion had been incinerated by concealed plasma turrets. Chiron saw the reports stacking. Every engagement point was turning into an execution zone. It wasn't a defense, it was a culling. A communications officer's voice broke through the bridge's static. "Grand Marshal," he hesitated, his mandibles clicking. "We're detecting a secondary energy surge." Chiron's focus sharpened. Location. The officer's display flickered. Not Earth. Chiron's brow ridge lowered. Then where? The laser plasma display flickered with incoming data. Then the realization hit. It wasn't Earth's last move. It was just their next. Admiral Toval's breath hitched as he read the coordinates. It's coming from the moon. For the first time since the battle began, silence settled over the bridge. Chiron stared at the display, the implications slamming into him like the debris of his own burning fleet. Earth had never been a target. It had been the first battleground. Now something else was waiting. And for the first time in his career, he didn't know what was coming next. If they thought Earth was the battlefield, they haven't looked up. General Keston Dane stared at the laser plasma display, watching as the Zorvath fleet repositioned above Earth's shattered exosphere. Their formation fractured, their command links disrupted, but they were still dangerous. The Doomspire lingered at the center of their broken armada, its sleek hull scarred with fire trails where human counterstrikes had found their mark. Across the war room, tactical officers scrambled through incoming reports. The air crackled with activity, subdued voices relaying fleet positioning, kinetic payloads primed for launch, defense systems cycling through the next phase of engagement. Dane's grip tightened behind his back as the reality set in. "They're adapting," one of the officers muttered. "They're not running anymore." "They will," Dane replied, his voice measured. "The only question is whether they'll be alive when they do." High above, within the disoriented Zorvath fleet, Admiral Varric Toval swept his four-clawed hands across his console, scanning for the source of the new threat. A rhythmic pulse of energy signatures spiked across their long-range sensors, emanating from the moon's south pole. It wasn't planetary interference. It was something alive. Toval turned sharply. "Grand Marshal," he began, "we have a—" His words were swallowed by the sudden flash of planetary artillery. The first hypervelocity projectile slammed into a Zorvath battlecruiser before its defensive barriers could cycle a response. The slug, roughly the size of a deep space freighter, ripped through the hull, leaving a jagged cavity, where the command deck had been. The vessel convulsed, its structure shuddering as atmospheric depressurization tore apart the corridors within. Chiron didn't flinch, his mandibles pressed into a firm lock, his pupils narrowing. Where did that come from? Toval's claws skittered over his console, bringing up a feed of the lunar surface. The regolith, once a barren wasteland of forgotten dust, had come to life. Bunkers emerged, their doors retracting in perfect sequence. From beneath the crust, railgun batteries the size of orbital stations lifted into launch positions. Their barrels gleamed with charged conduction plates, energy rippling across the surface as they primed for the next round of devastation. Dane exhaled through his nose as he watched the heads-up display. "They're seeing it now," he murmured. "The lie they told themselves about us." Another rail platform activated, this time on the far side of the moon, its weapons system locked onto the next Zorvath target. The projectile ignited with kinetic acceleration, hurtling across the void at near relativistic speed. The second cruiser never had a chance. The impact didn't merely destroy it, it detonated internal energy reserves, sending an explosive cascade through the fleet's formation. The blast wave rippled outward, catching adjacent ships in its wake, their hulls splitting from the sheer force of the impact. Chiron's mandibles tensed. "Enough." His voice carried across the command deck like a blade carving through air. "Send a shock division to the moon. Take their artillery offline immediately." Toval's fingers danced over his console, deploying strike teams. From the surviving Zorvath fleet, 4 carrier ships disengaged, sending dropships toward the lunar surface. Their hulls flared against atmospheric resistance, descending through the gray murk like iron, descending into embers. Dane turned toward his officers. "Are the automated defenses active, online and tracking?" one of the engineers confirmed. "Good." The moment the first Zorvath dropship breached lunar orbit, the defense systems responded. The ground itself seemed to react, the surface shifting beneath layers of deception. Lunar dust fell away from concealed emplacements, not just rail platforms, but hard light barrier generators, electromagnetic repulsors, and gravitational disruptors. As the dropships passed over the equatorial ridges, their navigation systems scrambled, struggling against the unseen distortion fields laced throughout the region. Targeting systems blinked in and out, weapons failing to lock. Then the first interceptor drones launched, AI-controlled, their frames sculpted for the low-gravity conditions of the moon. They tore through the sky like serpents of steel and fire. Inside one of the Zorvath carriers, a pilot fought against the flight controls. "They're hijacking our guidance systems." His words cut short as one of the interceptors sliced through his formation, unleashing a plasma payload directly into his engine thrusters. The resulting explosion scattered his squadron across the horizon, their wreckage tumbling toward the barren ground. Those who survived the descent found no relief on the surface. The moment their boots touched lunar rock, automated turrets unfolded from hidden trenches, their barrels locking on with silent efficiency. The first barrage of accelerated projectiles tore through Zorvath combat plating, sending shattered armor and flesh into the weightless atmosphere. Chiron watched in growing horror as his warriors, the finest of the Dominion, fell within seconds of deployment. Toval's voice cut through the chaos. "Grand Marshal, we can't secure the moon. We have to pull back the remaining forces." The bridge was silent. Chiron's hands curled into fists, his claws digging into his palms. He had never in his long, decorated history ordered a retreat. His lips parted to command otherwise. When the realization struck him like a dying star, the secondary energy surge. The one not from Earth, Toval turned, reading the incoming data, burst from their deep-range sensors. His mandibles parted in a moment of sheer disbelief. "Sir," he hesitated, "we're detecting another activation sequence." Chiron's eyes flicked toward the screen. The readings were impossible. Not from Earth, not from the moon. The signal was coming from Mars. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls of the command deck. Chiron's claws tightened around the console, his voice barely a breath. "They didn't just plan to defend themselves." Toval swallowed. "No, sir." His voice was thin, hollow. "They're planning to win. Shut it down. All of it." Director Orlan Vexer didn't look away from his console as he spoke. His fingers moved over the interface. adjusting the layers of intrusion protocols, each command peeling apart the Zorvath fleet's neural command grid like an exposed nerve. Across the Earth's cyber warfare division, the glow of heads-up displays bathed the room in pulses of shifting data. The war outside raged with kinetic fire and shattered hulls, but here, in the depths of Earth's underground cyber warfare facility, the war was already ending. The Dominion just didn't know it yet. Across the ruined battlefield of Earth's upper atmosphere, Zorvath warships reoriented, preparing to execute planetary bombardment. The Doomspire positioned itself above North America, its primary weapon arrays spinning to life. On the command deck, Grand Marshal Vorthek Chiron watched the weapons systems initialize: gravitic lances, arc disruptors, planetary breach payloads. Each one was a city killer designed to make a defiant species extinct. This was the endgame. Target acquisition locked, Admiral Varric Toval reported, his tone more subdued than before. Orders, Grand Marshal. Chiron's mandibles clicked in irritation. There was no hesitation in his decision. Fire. The weapon arrays pulsed, energy surging toward their firing cores. The Doomspire's arsenal had ended empires. It would reduce Earth to nothing but memory. Except nothing happened. For a fraction of a second, there was no sound beyond the steady murmur of instruments. Then, a ripple. The bridge's laser plasma displays flickered. Red warnings cascaded across every control interface. The primary firing sequence halted mid-cycle. Command inputs refused to register. Chiron straightened sharply. Status. An officer struggled to respond, fingers clawing at an unresponsive terminal. Weapons grid is locked out. The system isn't responding. Another alarm cut him off. The Dominion fleet, the war machine that had subjugated 36 worlds without failure, was shutting itself down. On the Doomspire, ship-wide communication feeds erupted into chaos. Primary targeting matrix offline. Drone fleet responding with hostile identifiers. Chiron's mandibles snapped apart as the ship shuddered beneath his feet. He turned toward Toval. Explain. Toval didn't respond. His 4 pupils were locked on his command interface, scanning the rapidly deteriorating system readouts. Our battle drones. He hesitated, as if saying it aloud might make it real. They've turned against us. Chiron's secondary hearts thudded against his chest cavity. What did you just say? The answer was outside their viewport. Through the Doomspire's observation panel, they saw the impossible. The Dominion's automated drone squadrons, designed for overwhelming planetary suppression, were turning their weapons against their own fleet. Toval's voice was almost hollow. The warships that were supporting them, they're being targeted. From Earth's war room, Vexor's fingers didn't stop moving. The attack had unfolded exactly as predicted. Payload infiltration complete. Commander Joran Velkar confirmed beside him. His pale gray eyes reflected the data swarm unfolding on his screen, tracking the systematic failure of Zorvath's neural fleet command. It wasn't enough to disrupt their communications. It wasn't enough to disable them. They had to turn the Dominion's greatest strength into its downfall. Vexor exhaled, his voice calm, surgical. Initiate reassignment protocol. Velkar nodded. His AI warfare teams were already deep within the Dominion's encryption networks. The Zorvath operated on a centralized fleet neural lattice, a single-source command structure meant to streamline their military efficiency. Their ships didn't function independently. They followed orders in absolute synchronization. That flaw was Earth's weapon now. The firewalls collapsed one by one. Drone targeting matrices shifted. Friend became enemy. Earth's own covert cyber warfare assets, stealth satellites hidden in deep orbit, routed false command signals directly into the Zorvath's fleet AI. The results were instantaneous. The entire Dominion command net collapsed in on itself. The first mutinous attack came from a Zorvath warcruiser stationed behind the Doomspire. Its plasma cannon banks, once aimed toward Earth, suddenly shifted their alignment. The crew on board didn't even have time to react. The first blast ripped through the nearest Dominion warship, cutting across its propulsion systems. Fire surged outward in violent tendrils, consuming the decks in a chain reaction of devastation. All across the battlefield, Zorvath warships found themselves under attack from their own forces. Drone squadrons swarmed their former allies, weapons releasing torrents of controlled destruction. Fighter craft turned on their own capital ships, their AI recognizing them as hostile entities. Earth's orbital defenses didn't even need to fire the final shots. The Zorvath were doing it for them. On the Doomspire, Chiron's vision narrowed, his pupils dilating into slits as he struggled to process the scale of the disaster unfolding before him. How? His voice was a rasp, his claws tightening into the armrest of his command chair. How is this happening? Toval looked up, eyes dark with realization. They've been inside our fleet systems this entire time. Chiron's body went rigid. This wasn't an accident. No, it wasn't. Velkar's voice came through the transmission feed into Earth's war room. His tone betrayed nothing. They think in lines. We think in waves. They move as a collective. We move as a storm. That's why they lost. Chiron could do nothing but watch as the remnants of his once invincible fleet tore itself apart. And then, another alarm sounded. Not an attack. Not a system failure. Something else. The Doomspire's long-range sensors detected new movement. Tavela's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, we're detecting multiple exospheric signatures." Charon's mandibles locked. From where? A new data stream flooded his heads-up display. Tactical signature. Wien identified. Origin point. Martian sector. Charon's entire body stiffened. The Dominion had never considered Mars a viable threat. A barren rock. Nothing but an abandoned human colony project filled with scientific infrastructure and mining operations. But what came over the horizon was not science. It was war. From the Martian surface, warships rose from underground bunkers, sleek, angular, a fusion of Zorvath engineering and human ingenuity. They weren't scavenged wreckage. They weren't stolen vessels. They were something new. Humanity wasn't just defending itself anymore. It was coming for the invaders. They were never fighting for survival. They were fighting for what comes after. Grand Marshal Vorthak Charon stood rigid in the command center of the Doomspire. His gaze locked onto the laser plasma display. Data flickered across the interface. Ship losses, system failures, entire fleet squadrons reduced to wreckage. The Zorvath Dominion, undefeated across 36 worlds, had been routed. And now, from the red horizon of Mars, warships unlike anything the galaxy had seen rose from their underground fortresses. The Dominion's greatest mistake had never been underestimating Earth's defenses. It was assuming that humanity's endgame was defense at all. The Martian fleet moved with an efficiency beyond what should have been possible for a species so newly introduced to the galactic stage. Their ships, a fusion of human ingenuity and repurposed Zorvath technology, were not just weapons. They were an answer. Charon's mandibles tightened. "This isn't war anymore," he said, voice taut with something dangerously close to fear. "This is eradication." Admiral Varric Tavale, his once measured confidence fractured, adjusted the ship's failing combat grid, trying in vain to coordinate their remaining forces. "We have no control over our own fleet," he admitted. "The AI subroutines are overriding every command we send." The battle that had begun as an invasion had unraveled into something far worse. The Dominion's own warships, hijacked by human cyber warfare, had turned against them. Drones swarmed their creators, firing into the flanks of once impenetrable capital ships. Zorvath formations collapsed, their own strategic doctrine weaponized against them. Charon exhaled sharply, his voice dropping into something like distant resignation. "Then we leave." Tavela's stiffened. "Sir, pull back the remaining ships. We retreat." The words tasted like poison. Retreat was not an option in the Dominion. It was not a word spoken by a Grand Marshal, and yet, here, now, there was no other choice. Tavela's hesitated, his claws still hovering over the navigation controls. "Sir, even if we retreat, where do we go? This isn't just a battle anymore. This is annihilation." The Grand Marshal turned from the failing laser plasma display, his slitted pupils dark with the weight of inevitability. "Send the order." Tavela's nodded once, sharply. A transmission rippled across the remaining Zorvath forces, a call to withdraw, to escape the unfolding catastrophe before them. But escape was a lie. From the shadows of space, the Martian war fleet closed in. Earth's first interstellar warships, the culmination of a decade of silent preparation, moved with the efficiency of predators who had already finished the hunt before the prey even knew it had begun. Their weaponry was not just human, not just Zorvath, it was something new, and it was aimed directly at the survivors. You don't leave, not today. Commander Ren Margrave stood on the command deck of the first of Earth's hybrid warships, his fingers resting lightly on the tactical control panel. The air around him hummed with the energy of an entire planet's vengeance. Through the observation viewport, Zorvath warships attempted to break formation, desperate to escape the battlefield they had once controlled. Margrave's expression remained unreadable. "They don't get to run," he murmured. "Not after what they planned for us." His second-in-command, Captain Draven Holt, glanced toward him. "Orders?" Margrave didn't need to think. "Lock down their navigation grid. No one leaves." Holt relayed the command. Across the fleet, disruptor pulses fired into the Zorvath escape vectors, shutting down their warp capabilities before they could even initiate jump sequences. Karen watched from the Doomspire, realization settling into his bones. They weren't just losing the battle, they were being erased from it. A transmission flickered onto his heads-up display, and for the first time since the war began, he heard a human voice directly. "Surrender." The message was cold, stripped of emotion, spoken by a species that had just rewritten the rules of war. Karen's throat tightened. His claws pressed against the console. "Surrender," he repeated, voice quiet. There was no answer this time, only the silence of inevitability. He turned toward Tavale, exhaling slowly. "Shut it down." Tavale's gaze flicked toward him, unreadable for a long moment. Then, silently, he obeyed. The Doomspire's remaining weapons powered down. Across the battlefield, the remaining Zorvath ships followed. The war was over. 6 months had passed. Karen sat in the center of the United Earth Council's war tribunal, his clawed hands bound in restraints that looked deceptively simple. The room hummed with quiet power, every figure seated before him, a representation of the planet that had dismantled his empire. At the center, Margrave leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Karen's mandibles twitched. "You will come for the Dominion," he said, not as a question, but as a truth already realized. Margrave was silent for a long moment. Then he said, simply, "No." The Grand Marshal's brow furrowed, confusion flashing across his face. Margrave continued, "We're not here to build an empire, we're here to make sure one like yours never rises again." Karen studied him, realization settling into the space between them. "Then what are you?" Margrave's gaze flickered to the laser plasma display, where the next fleet of Earth's interstellar warships prepared for deployment. Something far worse than an empire, something that couldn't be dismantled, bribed or controlled. "We are the consequence." Karen exhaled slowly, then softly, "Then the stars belong to you now." Margrave's expression remained unreadable. "The stars belong to those who can hold them." The tribunal adjourned, and in the skies above, Earth's next fleet prepared for launch. For the first time, humanity was not looking down, it was looking forward, looking outward, not just to defend, not just to retaliate, but to ensure that no one would ever see them as a target again. Earth was just another target, until humanity decided it was time to reshape the stars.